Hello, YNABers. My name is Jesse Meekum, and this is podcast number 49 for You Need a Budget, where we teach you 4 rules to help you stop living paycheck to paycheck, get out of debt, and save more money. Today, I interview Todd Tressider with financialmentor.com. He saved more money when he had a pretty good job back in the 80s, and he just gotten out of school, lived like he was still in school, saved a ton, and became financially free when he was 35. And this is an interview with him regarding what that was like, how he got there, and then what the transition was like once he was retired. Pretty interesting stuff. I really like Todd. You can check out his site and his writings, which are awesome, at financialmentor.com. Without further ado, here is my interview with Todd. All right, I'm here with Todd Tressider from financialmentor.com. Thanks for coming on, Todd. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me, Jesse.
So I was at FinCon a week ago or so, and Todd was on a panel, and the panel title was pretty intriguing because it was something like, what was it, Todd? Like the new retirement, I think. It's kind of the
it was how to retire at any age, or how to financial independence at any age, and retiring, the whole idea of retirement.
Yeah, and so I attended, and I've always, I put money in my 401k, I put money in my Roth or whatever, and 65 is that age where you're supposed to retire. So I attended this and kind of had my mind expanded. So I wanted to have you give a little bit of background to the listeners, what your life path was and kind of how you shook things up a little bit from the mainstream.
Yeah, well, I guess the most prominent story is where I committed to early retirement or financial independence at any age. And I was at UCLA. I was finishing up my degree at UCLA. My degree's from UC Davis, University of California, Davis. But I was down at UCLA having fun with friends and stuff and getting my degree requirements filled out. And there's a park down there called Santa Monica Park. It's a bluff right on the ocean, and it's where a lot of the homeless people hang out. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, just beautiful views, world-class views, and it's this gorgeous park. And I'm down there riding my bike through, and right at that same time, I've got all these friends heading off to Cubicle Nation, and they're stuck in their cubicles, but they come home in their fancy Porsche with their mortgage, their payments and all these things, but they're living their lives in Cubicle Nation. I'm kind of thinking, well, I think these bums have it better figured out than my buddies who just got their college degrees.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if I'm going, I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I just decided if I'm going to have to lead an economic life, plan my finances and everything, that I was just committed to planning it for financial freedom. Nothing else made sense. And so there was just it was a point of commitment where no alternative as a life path made sense to me. As long as I had to manage my finances and budget and pull my money together and invest, I may as well do it with a plan for financial freedom. And so I committed right then and there, and that's what started me on the path.
So what does your path look like? I mean, with that commitment, you're basically saying, my plan is I want to become financially free. So first, let me ask you what...
I started studying how people actually did it. So I'm very methodical. I'm very analytical and methodical. And so I just said, well, how did everybody else become financially free? So I started reading books, and started putting my plan together. So when I came out of college, I was offered a variety of jobs. I was actually, I had a fairly good background in business and stuff for a college kid. And I was offered quite a few different jobs. I turned them all down for a startup hedge fund, where I took a draw on commission. I was actually selling for the hedge fund. And we realized very quickly that I had a really strong financial brain. And so my whole premise was that I wanted to learn how to invest. That at my age, the key was to understand compound returns. And so I started working in the hedge fund, and we pulled me out of sales almost immediately and said, this guy's got a financial brain. And I started doing research. And so my job became to research basically every trading approach and every investment approach out there to figure out what was statistically valid and what was hogwash. And amazingly, almost all of it's hogwash. Very few things actually work. So most of what's taught out there does not work, or it provides really horrible risk-reward ratios. But there are a few things that work properly. And so about 12 years in that, so I did that for about 10 years. About 12 years into it, we sold the company, and I was, quote unquote, financially independent at age 35.
Yeah. Now, tell me about your lifestyle during this time. Where, I mean, hedge fund manager now, you think of like, being driven around in a car and kind of living a very posh, expensive lifestyle. So tell me what your lifestyle was like on that road to financial freedom.
Well, okay, so first of all, I did very well back then. I mean, let me put the dates back. This is into the early 90s, late 80s. And so let me think. Yeah, so it'd be middle 80s is when I started. Early middle 80s is when I started. And so back then they weren't even called hedge funds. They were called private placement partnerships.
Okay.
And we didn't command the income that they do now. And so I was still making very nice income. It was low six figure at the time, which was huge for a guy in his 20s back in the 1980s. I mean, that's probably the equivalent of middle six figures today with inflation and everything. Mm-hmm. And I just led a college kid lifestyle. I mean, I really didn't have big needs. My joys come from outdoor recreation. I love backpacking and snow skiing and hiking and camping, and I'm a runner, distance runner and cyclist. I mean, the stuff I love doesn't cost a lot of money once you own the basic toys. Mm-hmm. And reading books, I love to read. I love to think. I don't watch television or any of that stuff. And so my lifestyle just didn't cost that much. And I was a single guy. And so I owned my 4-wheel drive truck and, a comfortable bed and read my books. And I just didn't spend much. And so I saved, 70, 80% of what I made.
Awesome. And so the sale of the company, because I can hear in the listeners' minds, they're saying, well, he sold his company and that was the ticket. But
actually, it wasn't. When we sold the company, we really blew it. I would say selling that company is one of the dumbest financial decisions I've ever made in my life.
Fascinating.
And so you think that it was the ticket, but it wasn't, because I basically slaughtered the cow for a few pounds of hamburger.
Okay.
I got a payout on it, but it's nothing like what people might be imagining. I was really pretty much financially independent before the company was sold. The company was sold was gravy on the top, but it wasn't the key. So if somebody's thinking that, they're really missing the boat. The key was saving 70 to 80% of my income and controlling my lifestyle needs of what I really want. Like when I travel, my wife and I have done a lot of travel. When we travel, we don't go 5-star hotels, 5-star American style hotels and dine in fancy. We like to go local. Mm-hmm. We like to experience the local culture. And so it's just kind of a value system that drives it.
It's interesting because I've been rolling this around in my mind since the panel where I thought, I mentioned on a podcast earlier that one of my goals was to pay off my house before I was 30. And I did it. I'm 31 now. I did it. I think I had 8 months to spare. I actually owed taxes to the IRS because I'd made some serious calculation errors on what I should have withheld. So I get my accountant's like, hey, you owe this. It was a ton of money, right?
Right.
As it always is. Too much, as we would say. So he tells me you owe this money, but I had this goal where I wanted to pay off my house before I turned 30. And this is a little bit crazy, but I was so obsessed with the goal, I thought, I'll just pay the IRS as I go. So I paid off the house, hit my goal, and then worked with the IRS I didn't even actually work with them. I just sent them money for 3 months after the due date. And then they sent me a letter saying, hey, here, you owe us interest, and I cleaned it up. So I don't recommend people play with them in that way. But
the IRS is like playing with a junkyard dog. Don't do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're guilty until you're just guilty in their eyes. So anyway, but what I loved about it was I was so focused on this goal, this paying off my house, and now I've got this great house. It's got plenty of room. I've got 5 kids, so we've got plenty of room though. And then in the panel that you were on, I'm sitting there thinking, I don't have another goal. I've got my business, but I don't get excited from goals like grow revenue. That doesn't speak to me, So I was wondering if you could maybe speak to that. Once you were financially free, where were your motivations? what kind of goals did you have? And this is mainly like self-help for me now, not really for the listeners, but.
Yeah, no, this is actually, you're hitting on a great question. Almost nobody grabs that question. It's only because of the point you're at in your life that you picked up on it. So I'll tell you the story. When I was financially independent, right? And I was living in Lake Tahoe, which again,
Awesome.
just like, yeah, it's Mecca,
Yeah.
I mean, perfect for a single guy. And I was, I mean, I'm hanging out with the ski bums and I play volleyball in the afternoons on the beach with all the guys. And, I'm the only one with a real career. I mean, great people. Anyways, I sold this company and I had an assistant living down in the Carson Valley, which is kind of the back side of the Sierras behind Lake Tahoe.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm driving down to drop off the computers at her house after the sale of the company. And so I come up over this vista and at the very top of the Sierras and then looking down over the Carson Valley, and I'm just high as a kite, happy as could be. I'm on top of the world. I made my goal, right? Just like you're talking about. I made my goal. I'm so damn awesome. I retired by 35. And that was the absolute peak from a physical standpoint of being on top of the Sierras and from a metaphorical standpoint, because it was all downhill from there into the valley. It ushered in one of the most difficult periods of my life.
Oh,
And it connects back to exactly what you're talking about, was it not having a goal. But there's another layer to it, and that is that I had made a classic mistake. I call it the million dollar myth. And that is, everybody thinks if I just had $1 million, life would be okay. All my troubles would vanish, or whatever thing they attach to $1 million. Maybe it's not all their troubles, but they think like they'd be free, or they could have the life they want, or whatever it is. And I call that the $1 million myth, because the reality is when you get $1 million or whatever the number is, you'll be just the same person you were before. And so any issues you had before will still be with you after that. The only problem is once you're financially independent, and financial independence doesn't occur to $1 million, by the way, I just call it $1 million myth. Mm-hmm. But once you're financially independent, what you lose is the ability to blame it on anyone but yourself. All your excuses are gone now because you're truly free. And if you aren't happy as a clam, then the problem is you and nothing else. You can't blame it on your boss. You can't blame it on your financial circumstances. And you can't blame it on any of the circumstances of your life. Mm-hmm. You are in charge, and you have to own responsibility for it. And so that ushered in a really wild period for me where I began a lot of personal growth and just kind of like really trying to sort out this mess of like, okay, I was this driven guy. I achieved my goal. I became financially independent. And why am I not happy as I could ever be? Like, why was I happier when I was climbing toward the goal than I am now that I have?
Yeah.
So anyway, and that's where I began to learn a lot of lessons. Like, here's one that just, it connects to the conversation. We could talk endlessly on this, but this one in particular is a really powerful lesson, which is anytime you ascribe an internal state of being and make it predicated on an external circumstance, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I'm trying to say that I'll be happy when I'm financially independent or when I reach this financial goal, happiness is an internal state of being. The financial goal is an external circumstance. Therefore, it will not work. Okay, because an internal state of being is not dependent upon anything external to you. It's entirely internal to you.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I don't know if you know.
There's a lot of complexity to that. There's a lot that goes behind that. You could play with that for a long time and still keep learning from it.
That's really interesting. I don't know if you are familiar with Leo Babauta from ZenHabits.net.
I know of him. I haven't followed him closely, but I'm aware of his existence. Yeah.
I did an interview with him last week, and it was really fascinating because, okay, 2 or 3 weeks ago I talked with a guy that's a career coach, like 48 Days to the Work You Love. His name's Dan Miller.
Sure.
And he's telling me, like, I love goals. I wanted to launch a product every week or every month. He was going to launch a new product that year for his business. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I want to do that. And then I talk with Leo, and Leo's like, I don't do goals. And I'm like, whoa. But Leo's extremely productive and just extremely productive, awesome writer. And, I aspire to be so productive. So he's saying I don't do goals. He says, because your goal, you work 2 years, you've obsessed over a goal, and then you change your mind, and you've spent 2 years obsessing over something that changed. So then I have that, and then I come back to this, and I'm thinking, I feel aimless without something to work toward. And then you're kind of saying, hey, after you work toward it, you may feel just as aimless, once you get there. So yeah, now I have no idea what to do with my life, but
I'm kind of halfway between the two of them.
okay.
Okay. So I think goals have a valid purpose, which is to create a point of focus in your life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So like what I do, as a matter of fact, I just finished doing it. As you said in the beginning, we both met at Financial Bloggers Conference, FinCon.
Mm-hmm.
And I run my business, which is a financial blog, on a cycle from FinCon to FinCon because I get so many good ideas that I sort of regenerate my business plans from one year to the next.
Gotcha.
And a lot of it's from the contacts and learning that goes on at FinCon. And so I just finished reworking them. So there's a lot of goals in there. But really what it is it's me thinking through, spending some focused time. I spent a couple days on it, focused time sorting through all the different objectives for the business, the different ideas I've got, and converting into some systematic process that gives shape. So I'm not randomly showing up to my business each day, but rather I have targeted, intentioned things I'm working toward that are strategic and are designed with specific objectives in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're more like action oriented instead of outcome oriented. It sounds like from your description.
Well, I'm wanting specific outcomes, but I'm thinking in terms of systems and strategy of how to achieve those outcomes, and then that gives me a context by which I show up into my office each day.
Mm-hmm.
And but to play back to Leo's stuff, it's always a work in progress. I'm constantly reshaping it, and that's what I said. Like I reshaped it from last year. I hit about 3/4 of what I intentioned for last year.
Mm-hmm.
I got about 3/4 of it done, and it was very purposeful to have that there. But I wasn't like strung out to dry where I just, I had to get everything done on the list or I was a failure or anything like that. It was more like, no, I'm just setting intentions. I'm systematically working toward things. Is that making sense?
It is.
I consider it a balanced phrase because I've tried both extremes. I've tried being Mr. Goal oriented and I've tried living without goals, and neither one really works for me. I like kind of somewhere in between.
Yeah, I liked your word. I think the word intention is a great word, and I guess in a sense, I mean, I do set goals for myself in the morning. I have a list, and I make sure those things on that list are most important to me and that will make me happy. And strangely enough, it's never catching up on something on Netflix. So it does keep me fairly productive, and I wonder if I couldn't.
And it's strategic too. Is the thing.
It fits in.
See, yeah. Well, what I found is that if I don't do this, I mean, you can get easily swayed by the flavor of the day. I mean, you and I both have stuff crossing our desks every day. Everybody wants, some opportunity, has some great new opportunity or new relationship or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so by having a structure and a strategic plan, it gives me a context by which to say yes and no because I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just whatever flavor, whatever wind crosses blows my way.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of tossed to and fro. Tell me about, because you've mentioned your business now, and then some of people are wondering, well, Todd said he's financially free, but now he's talking about running a business. So tell me kind of how financialmentor.com started. And I think in the panel you said you'd gotten into some real estate back in the day and obviously managed whatever you'd retired on. But I'm curious what got you into the blogging and kind of what you're doing now.
It's kind of a couple generations. I actually fell into financial coaching through contact with Robert Kiyosaki before he became very famous. Mm-hmm. And myself and a couple other people were teaming up with Robert. We were going to put together a financial coaching program for Robert. And I was supposed to be the financial brains in it. Robert was the marketing arm, and some other people were kind of putting it together and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I was supposed to create the curriculum and all these things. And that fell apart. Too many large egos in the room and various reasons. Robert's lawyers put kibosh on it and all that. But what it did is it caused me to fall in love with financial coaching. So I had taken some coaching courses as a result, because if I was going to create this curriculum, I had to understand how coaching worked, because there's a very specific way in which you work with a client as a coach. It's not, that term's thrown around a whole lot now, like brokers call themselves financial coaches. That's hogwash. Financial coaching, there's this very specific skill set that you bring to the table to help people achieve their goals. So I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, I never knew of this communication technique, this ability and what it can do for people. And so up until then, I mean, people knew what I had done, you know, friends, family, that kind of thing, and they would ask me questions. And my wife had a nice way of putting it. She would say I was standoffish. I would call it almost arrogance. You know, people didn't even have the basis by which to ask questions. The questions were so off base. I mean, this was back in the 90s when stocks were going nuts.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody wanted to know what the next hot stock. That's all anybody wanted to know. And they just didn't even understand the basics of personal finance and how to build wealth and how wealth is built, and, you know, the mathematical expectation formulas that govern wealth growth, and, you know, all the stuff that you really have to understand to build this thing properly. And so there's just so much conversation that had to go behind every question they asked that I was just kind of standoffish. Like, I just didn't even want to deal with it, right? And one time my wife challenged me. She said, you know, why don't you do something with this knowledge? You spent a lifetime acquiring it. It worked for you. Why don't you do something with it? You know, and I was like, well, okay. And then, but I still didn't do anything with it. So I had the financial coaching site up since '98. And it was just a site in frames that made all the mistakes, and it kept the financial coaching practice going. And I just had some clients as a sideline, and I did it because I loved doing it. It was never really business; it never even paid the bills. Mm-hmm. And then I was building my real estate portfolio, which is what I'd mentioned in that presentation. And around 2005, I started getting really uncomfortable with real estate and all that was going on in the financing industry. So I started unwinding my portfolio, and I sold it all by the end of 2006, which was very fortunate in hindsight. But at the time, you know, just as a little side note, at the time, that was a really hard decision. I mean, I did not have anyone supporting me on it.
Oh, wow.
Everybody told me I was a fool. I was an idiot, because I wasn't just doing 1031 exchanges, tax-free exchanges into other real estate, which is what everybody said I should do.
Right,
you know,
right.
I was liquidating and paying the taxes. I was saying I want out of the market entirely. And it was a go-go market. I mean, people were making gobs of money. People thought I was stupid. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was the absolute top in hindsight. But at the time, it was a very difficult decision. So then that brought home this whole thing that ties back into what you and I know as Adam Baker's presentation, the opening keynote, but it's something I play with a lot, which is the why of life. Mm-hmm. You know, what do you want to do with your life? What's your life stand for? What are you about? And this business had kind of been operating in the background. Financial Mentor had been operating in the background. I've been coaching clients one-on-one for, 7-8 years at that point. And I just said, you know, I really want to do something with this. I want to systemize this. I want to bring this to millions of people. You know, at that point, I had figured out what I call now my 7 steps to 7 figures process, which is not even a product I can offer now. So it's like, it's in drawers. So this is not even a pitch session, right? I mean, I'm not even weaving it because I couldn't sell it to you if you wanted to buy it. But I had systemized this whole process through working with clients for years to understand that there's a step-by-step process that people have to go through to pull this game off. And I had mapped people in, and it's when I figured out the 7 steps and I had mapped it out that I started having consistent success with my clients. Up until then, I'd had kind of spotty success. Like, some clients did really well, other clients really didn't go anywhere, and I couldn't figure out what was the difference, what was missing for some people and not for others. And I really fumbled with this thing for like 5 years. And around the time I sold my real estate is when I felt like I had it, like I had a real system that could actually help people. And I said, you know, it was that why thing. It just came out. I said, I got to do something with this. You know, I really care about it. I want to get it out. It's my gift. I'm a freak in my understanding of how to put this together. And so I just decided to run with it. And that's where Financial Mentor started growing.
That's awesome. So we have parallel stories in a lot of ways. It's kind of like you realize you find something that you enjoy, that's kind of been there all along, and then and just kind of make it, you know, and then it grows and kind of changes all the time on you, and you're pleasantly surprised at the result. So.
Yeah, so like if you look at it, I started because I was fascinated by the investment process and compounding money. And so to me, it was like Monopoly for adults. Mm-hmm. You know, how could I figure out the investment game? And it was almost like this idea of like a money machine. Like, how could I figure out the investment process down to like a money machine, systemize it? And, you know, so once I kind of got the hedge fund thing down and really done a lot of research in investing and everything, it was no longer a path of growth for me. And that's when we wanted to sell the business. once I kind of got, I was no longer growing, and that turns out to be a theme in my life. I have a high value on personal growth, and so financial mentors just kind of a next step where it's like, okay, now I'm reframing myself as an educator. So I'm taking the financial knowledge now, and I'm trying to see how it's not just about Todd and compounding Todd's wealth or his clients' wealth when they've already got wealth, right? It's not adding percentage points to rich clients. It's more like, now, how can you take this and repackage this knowledge and see if you can help average people, normal working people, build extraordinary wealth?
Yeah.
And that was the challenge I kind of took on when I started coaching. And again, I fumbled with it for years. And then if you look at the testimonials, I mean, I'm getting results now.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that. You and I are maybe on, well, I don't know, because you'd mentioned that you talk about budgeting quite a bit, but I tend to kind of, I teach people like, hey, one of my taglines I often say is, you take care of the cash flow and the balances take care of themselves. And so I just try and teach people, like, I don't have a specific debt pay down strategy. I don't have a strong stance on credit cards, but I just want people to be purposeful and intentional with their money and make sure that their money is doing things that they really care about. And then strangely enough, you end up spending a lot less money because a lot of your money was doing things you didn't care for anyway. And so satisfaction goes up, cash flow goes up, and then that's kind of where I'm done. I don't have a big investing opinion one way or the other. I mean, I have my own way of doing it, but I like that you've kind of taken it much, much further as you've lived it, and then as you've coached people. I think that's great, especially for a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast. They're doing well now. And a lot of them are debt free now, and they are kind of wondering, like, okay, what's the next step? So let me ask you this.
Well, can I plug in on something?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I would say is you completely nailed the personal finance level. Okay, so what you're saying, I 100% agreement with you on the personal finance level. And then what we start doing is we start tacking layers of skills on top of that as they expand and grow upward. So like there's a whole nother skill set in here which I teach around risk management. So the idea is you want to build your wealth with higher highs, higher lows. Nobody goes straight to wealth, right? Everybody has setbacks. And so as good as I've ever been able to figure out, because there's no perfect system, there's no perfect investment approach. Every investment approach has an Achilles heel. And if somebody tells you otherwise, they're either a liar or they're self-deceived. And so you have to learn principles of risk management because certain formulas govern the compounding of wealth, the mathematical expectation equation, and how there's mathematics behind why wealth grows the way it does. This is not just Todd's opinion. This is all driven by math. It's all provable stuff. And so you layer on risk management skills, and then you layer on investment disciplines that have a positive mathematical expectation. So you start layering different skill sets on top as you grow beyond the personal finance level into the wealth level. Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. And
it's almost like taking what you said and doing the same thing at the next level and finding a system for that. Like what you've explained is a perfectly valid system for the level that it's operating at. And then you take that's like the foundation. The principle is you can't, how tall you can build a building is based on the quality of the foundation underneath it, the depth and strength of the foundation, right? And so what you're doing is you're describing a strong, solid foundation of personal finance.
Yeah.
And then you start building the building up from there.
Awesome. And we all want skyscrapers. No, not really, but
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I love it. I'll let the listeners kind of chew on that, but I wanted to open their eyes to your site because I got back from FinCon and I'd gotten your card and I was kind of rifling through. We all get like stacks of business cards at the end of those things, and I was rifling through because I couldn't remember the name of your site. I knew your name. I knew I was looking for Todd, so when I found your card, I popped it into my iPad, and then my wife kept telling me, like, hey, are you going to go to bed? And I'm like, yeah, I will in a second, because I know she'd fall asleep eventually, and then it'd be fine. But I just read and read and read. So I wanted to kind of turn people onto that. I have a lot of people that are really good managing their money, and now they can kind of look to financialmentor.com and see what you're working on. And, I got to be honest, for whatever you do, and I hope you do eventually sell an awesome, just, fantastic product that you're working on. But in the meantime, you have so much free information on there that, you could grow old just digesting that and stuff. So there's plenty there for people to look at, before you ever launch that product. And I think it's awesome stuff. So
thank
heavily
you for
recommended.
sharing that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jesse. If people are interested, the second row menus have a ton of free content done by. Eventually, those are going to be tutorials. Right now, I'm just patching in, favorite posts and stuff, and they're starting to form tutorials and stuff. But there's there's probably 1,500 pages of printed content. If you were printed all out, it'd be like 1,500 pages of education.
Yeah, and it's I love your philosophy, and I love that you set a goal, you reached it, and then you've learned so much over the years that you're now sharing again. So I appreciate that. I'll probably want to chat with you again sometime in the future, and especially once you have your product fine-tuned and everything and ready to go to market. I'd love to see it and tell everyone about it too. So
that'd be great.
Well, I will let you go, Todd, and let you get back to sipping martinis on the beach. So, Wait, aren't you in Nevada? Is that where you're at?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So no beach in Nevada, but
sure, the whole sandy desert is a beach, right?
That's true. You don't get to the water. Now, you said you're a distance runner. You're not like a crazy like Death Valley ultra runner type distance runner, are you?
No.
Okay.
No. I run for the pure joy of it. So
okay.
I do some distance events. I did the Reno Tahoe Odyssey, which is a 12-member, 24-hour team relay race that goes, I think it's like 178 miles through the mountains.
Whoa.
So I do some stuff. So I think my leg was 18 plus miles of hills or something like that, the leg I ran. But no, normally I'm just doing, 6, 7, 8 miles of trails around my house or something, just for the pleasure of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll definitely stay in touch. And then, we look forward to talking with you again.
Good talking to you, Jesse.
Okay. Thanks, Todd.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And there you have it, my interview with Todd Tressider of financialmentor.com. If you guys have anyone you would like to hear on the podcast, let me know at jesse@youneedabudget.com. Catch us on Twitter at YNAB, or me personally at Jesse Meekum, or on Facebook at facebook.com/iYNAB. Until next time, follow YNAB's 4 rules and you will win financially. You have not budgeted like this.